In this video, we will be reviewing the most volatile markets. To access the most volatile markets widget, you will need to be on a custom page. From there, you go up to the top right-hand corner where it says Add Widget, and at the bottom, you'll see Most Volatile Markets. None of the markets will be selected, so you can click this box and select all of the below markets, or you can keep it unselected and only select markets that matter to you. It's up to your preference. And then from there, you'll click Save. It will populate and show you all of our available markets and what their current volume, rejection, head haul, and tender lead time volatilities are. So starting on the left side, you'll see the name of the city and the market. You'll see the market code. So this is what you would use if you were searching on a chart. And then you'll see the US market share. So the US market share is a percentage, and it is kind of going to give you how much freight is coming out of that specific market in reference to the rest of the country. So currently Ontario is at about 4%. Atlanta is at about 3.5%. So you can think of those markets as having, a larger market share than the rest of the country. The whole US market shares add up to equal 100%, and they can never be above 100%, and it can never be below 100%. So if Ontario, California gains market share in the next couple of days, another market in the country will have to lose market share, or it could be multiple markets. We don't necessarily know which markets are losing market share unless you're watching that. Market share just kind of gives you a reference point on if there is some volatility going on in that specific market, whether it's going to affect the surrounding markets. The next column is going to be the outbound volume volatility. So this bottom value is going to be the indexed value for the current value for that market. So Ontario, California makes up 389 basis points of the whole US volumes right now. And then that top number is going to be the week over week change, so negative 3.8%. So there's less volume coming out this week from Ontario than there was last week. You can kind of see that none of these boxes are highlighted, but you'll see some other ones on this screen are. The way that this widget works is that it compares itself to itself. Each market compares itself to itself. So if you're looking at Ontario, California, or Los Angeles, which is at a -9, less freight coming out of Los Angeles, but it's not highlighted, which means that that is not out of the norm for the Los Angeles market. If I move over to the rejections, you can see Ontario, California is at a 5%, and then it's at a 1.5% increase. So this bottom value is the current value. So right now in Ontario, 5% of freight is being rejected, and that number has gone up in 1 week, 1.5%. Again, this box is highlighted because that is out of the norm for the Ontario, California market. Going to the Houston market, you can see they're at a 2% rejection rate, and that number has gone down, which means more freight is being accepted. So that is also out of the norm for the Houston market. So it's just important to pay attention to the markets that are highlighted, and those markets just might cause you a little bit more volatility. If you see that freight is being increasingly rejected, so the Ontario, California market, you might assume there might not be enough capacity to account for that. And that might obviously change the rates in that specific market. Moving on to the head haul volatility. This bottom value is the current value for Ontario, California. So it's at a 10. And remember, that is an indexed value. So the number, again, doesn't necessarily matter, but the change of that number does. So you can see that Ontario, California has decreased 16% in 1 week for their specific head haul index. And the way that the head haul index is calculated is we take the outbound volume and subtract it from the inbound volume for a market. So Ontario, California, if I click on this box right here, it will populate a chart next to me, so I can figure out which one is causing that 16% decrease. I'm going to take my time window into about 3 months and try to figure out which one is shifting that number. So you can see both the outbound volume, which is the blue line, and the inbound volume have decreased in the past week, but it looks like the amount of freight that's been coming out has decreased a little bit more rapidly than the amount of trucks coming in. You can think about outbound tender volume as loads available on a dock ready to be picked up, and the inbound tender volume is drivers delivering into the Ontario, California market needing to be reloaded. So you can see there's just been a little bit of a difference between the way that those two have trended. If I click on the Detroit market, that's a great example of one that has had a strong decrease of 44%. So moving on to the last column, that is the tender lead time volatility. This bottom value is the amount of days from which the load was tendered to when the load needs to be picked up. So 2.5 days is the average tender lead time in Ontario, California, and it's gone down 0.05% in 1 week. So Atlanta is at about 3.5 days. So you can kind of think of the tender lead time as the shipper's sentiment towards the marketplace. When you see that the tender lead times in certain markets are increasing, that means that shippers and customers may be feeling some type of tightening in the market. So they're trying to get their loads tendered out sooner. If you see that they're going down, then there might not be some type of volatility going on there, and they're just feeling confident that their loads are being accepted. So they're not really worried about sending those loads out sooner. You can expect to see tender lead times increase during holidays and peak season and things like that, but most of the time they hover around 3 days. I hope that you found this video useful. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to your customer success manager.